Good morning. I am Steve Weber. Welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show here on Spirituality Gone Wild. See, there's my Spirituality Gone Wild banner. And we are welcoming you to show number 134. It's Friday, February 26th. Alrighty, so today I have a guest, Jay Toops. He will be joining us at about 15 past the hour, and Jay is going to talk about his startup company, BioRoot Energy, and their vision is to convert lots of waste carbons, lots of trash into clean alcohol fuels. So we'll discuss the concept today, and then kind of paint the big picture of what Jay has envisioned for all of us, how he's going to change the world. All right. And my monologue today is going to be is titled "The Challenge of Big Ideas." The challenge of big ideas. I've got my own big idea. Jay's got a big idea. So I'll just lay out my experience of what some of the challenges are in terms of it, and most of it has right to do, with right between, what the ego and what our mind wants to limit us to do. So anyway, that's coming up in just a minute. Let me tell you about what'll happen next week. Today is Friday, the last week of, the last day of February that we're doing a broadcast. And in true form, I said that I was going to do a few less shows this year. I averaged, my first 5 months, I averaged 20 shows a month, basically 5 per week. And this year I said, hey, I'm going to cut that back just a little bit, give myself an easier pace, and 17 shows a week. And so I did 17 in January and 17 in February, and that'll be 200 shows for the year. So that's the goal. I did 100 shows in the first 5 months, but we're going to cut that back to 100 shows every 6 months. So we'll do 200 shows this year. So right on track at the end of 2 months. All righty. So now next week, the plan is to do 5 broadcast shows next week. But guests lined up for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Tuesday, author Amy Gray Cunningham joins us, and she wrote a memoir, Daring to Believe, and it's about her donating a kidney. And she is also someone who is going to work with me on soul realignment, the Akashic Records accessing. So that's going to be a great conversation next Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, Nicole Nassif, and she's going to introduce her brand new restaurant concept. Nicole and I worked together at Bubba Gump starting back in 1988 or 1998 when Nicole and I met. She was in Chicago and I was there for the Bubba Gump grand opening. And so anyway, we ended up doing probably about 18 or 19 grand openings together. And now she's got a brand new concept, Imy's Kitchen. And we'll tell you all about that on Wednesday. And then Thursday, Stacy Lamar King returns to the American Gumption Morning Show. He was with us about 3 weeks ago and told his story, post-traumatic stress disorder, a Marine, 22-year service, and but he's a project manager, and we're going to talk about project manager. He's a trainer for the PMP exam, and so we're going to talk about project management with him coming up. So that's going to be next Thursday. All righty. So just to repeat, Tuesday, Amy Gray Cunningham. Wednesday, Nicole Nassif. And on Thursday, Stacy Lamar King. So we have fun planned for next week. All righty. Let me shift gears, and let's go ahead and talk about the monologue this morning. And the monologue is the challenge of big ideas, the challenge of big ideas. So have you ever had a big idea? Have you ever had, I'm talking about not a little idea, I'm talking about a really, really, really big idea. Have you ever had one? So it's the kind of an idea, it's such a big idea that people say, it's impossible, it won't work. If it's too good to be true, that idea it's too good to be true. Or if it's such a good idea, how come nobody's thought of it before? That's the kind of big idea I'm talking about. And in your heart, you know that idea is true. You just kind of at your soul level, you're like, oh man, I got to go do this. I don't have any choice but to not do this. I cannot not do this. I can't do this. I cannot not do this. I have to go do this. That's the big idea that I'm talking about. Your spirit or inner self is 100% committed to it. And, you feel like it's your life purpose or your destiny in life. And so that's the kind of big idea that I'm thinking. So what are some of the challenges? Well, there's really only one challenge, and that's your mind. That's the ego. And, the ego, people ask you, well, if it's such a big idea, how come nobody's done it before? And that'll never work. But then the ego gets it, so that's what other people are saying. And you're listening to that, because you're a smart person and you don't just blindly try stuff that, has no chance of success. But your ego will then start to play a little bit tricks on you. And it says things like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you can do something that big? That's the kind of questions that, my ego has asked me. And then it'll remind you of little things. It'll say, you don't really know what you're doing. Psst, hey, tap, tap, tap. You don't really know what you're doing here. Oh, by the way, you don't have enough money to actually pull this off. So, you can never do it. There's a million little tiny challenges and problems. You'll never figure it all out. It's too much work. And don't forget, you don't know the right people. So, you might as well just give up right now and, pack it in and go back to thinking small. And so that's the kind of stuff that the ego, the mind, plays with you when you're going for something big. And so here's the problem, though, is that your inner self knows that you need to go do it. And then, the brain kicks in and, hey, the brain, nothing wrong with the brain going, okay, there's problems, there's challenges, but the ego gets involved and says, oh, these are impossible challenges. You don't know enough. You'll never get it done. You don't know the right people. All right. So the battle really becomes between your spirit and your thinking. So that like gut level, and then that thinking, that brain. So it's your spiritual self and your human self, or it's like the non-physical versus the physical, the non-physical versus the physical. So for 10 years, I was living in Montana, chasing what I thought was my dream. And I guess what was the dream in its nutshell? I wanted to live the good life in Montana, have a piece of land. I want to make a shop, some equipments. The mountains are right there, go hiking. And, that was kind of my vision. And then part two of it was I decided I was going to be a professional speaker. So the original dream came about, the genesis of it, in the early 2000s when I was like, what do I do when I'm done with this Bubba Gump thing? When I'm done being Forrest Gump, I got to have a plan. And so I said, okay, my plan is I'll move to Montana someday. So I bought a piece of property, and then I bought a second property, and then I bought a third property, then I bought a fourth property. And I kind of went crazy buying too many properties. And then I finally ended up moving there, and I had all these properties and I didn't have enough cash flow to support them. And the 2008, real estate crash and financial crisis came, and boop, that was really the end of my dream in terms of like that whole thing. So you start liquidating properties, you go into survival mode, and you're like just doing whatever you have to do to kind of, unravel the mess and the challenge that I had gotten myself into. So I had this dream of like going to Montana and living there, living happily ever after. And, it kind of unraveled, and I stabilized it. And then I spent the next 10 years or the last 10 years there. But it was like in this like kind of survival mode. And so I was, then the second part of the dream was becoming a professional speaker. And of course the challenge I had is I didn't have a message. I said, oh, I'm a speaker, and, Forrest Gump and, Gumption. And, I kind of figured out the basics, but, I kind of, once I dug into it, I realized I didn't have that much, I didn't have that much material. I was a good entertainer, good speaker, but I wasn't able to, back it up with any kind of real, oomph behind it. So, what was the message of Gumption really? So anyway, over the next 10 years, or the next 5 to 7 years, really, I end up like, okay, let's figure out how to make this thing happen. And so I started doing things like, I learned a bunch of new skills. First of all, I learned how to be a speaker. I was an entertainer. I knew how to entertain, but I didn't know how to actually deliver a message. And so I learned that. And one of the things I did was I started writing a lot, and the writing allowed me to become a thinker in terms of defining what it was that I thought and what I believed in. And so writing, was the vehicle for me to articulate and to define what it was that I believed. And my thinking got a whole lot better during that time, because I was, doing this writing and doing this thinking about different things. And so the whole thought leadership of Gumption and the life lessons from the movie, that all occurred during that time. And my own beliefs, I've talked about them several times on this show, where, I took all of my old, original things I learned as a child and growing up, and it said, well, what do I believe? And I examined all those beliefs and got rid of them. So, that all began really in earnest in 2009, which I originally called my year of transformation. But I've just in recent few months, I've started calling it the year of awakening, and my first year of transformation, because really every year after that was a year of transformation. So when I called 2009 originally the year of transformation, it was my first year of transformation, but it was the year when I went, okay, we got to do things differently than what we've been doing them. So in the last few years, after I kind of figured all those things out, I was like, okay, I got to give up some dreams that I've been carrying around with me for like the last 10, last 20, and the last 40 years. I had basically 3 big dreams that, like, I realized really weren't my dreams any longer, but they were still like there. But you go, oh, do I really want to do those things? Am I really committed to doing that? And I ended up giving those up, and then decided that I was going to leave Montana and get rid of all the stuff. And that was part of the dream, right? Getting rid of the stuff was letting go of those dreams that I had, and kind of going back out into the world and doing what I felt like I needed to do. And that's the American Gumption. That's the big dream. That's the challenge of the big dream. I'm just talking about the challenges of it. But the big dream, which I'm not defining in this conversation, was the American Gumption Project. The American Gumption Project. All right. So, and then, the ego, you got to go, well, gosh, I'm quitting. I'm giving up on these dreams. Gosh, a 40-year dream, and I'm going to give up on it. And really, it was like, you know what? It just really wasn't that important to me anymore. I mean, it would have been nice, and it would have been great if it had happened, but just things changed, and I just didn't have the interest any longer in pursuing that kind of stuff. And, 60 years old, very different than 20 years old when I kind of defined some of those things. And so, you just have to accept the fact that, okay, I'm not a failure. Those experiences were all good learning opportunities and brought me to where I am today. And really the American Gumption Project was born. But in order to execute on that dream, the American Gumption Project, I needed to have freedom. I needed to go out there in the world and do these things over again. So I had to give up all these things that I thought that I wanted to have and keep, but realize that just were kind of holding me down, that albatross, the boat anchor, things holding you back. So, and the kind of the final straw turning point where I kind of turned the corner on the chasing after it and not just like sitting back and waiting was I said, okay, I'm leaving. And I told a friend, and he said, man, I just feel like you're giving up on that dream, the Montana dream. A friend that I knew for 10 years who had been right with me when I first arrived and welcomed me to the neighborhood, so to speak. And he said, man, I just feel like you're running away. And it really bothered me. And I went home, or it really, like, I thought about it. And I didn't think about it long. I went home and I just am I running away? Am I running away? And then I realized, no, I'm not running away. I'm running towards, because I was going for the dream, the American Gumption vision and dream. And we've talked about that before, so we'll talk about that again. But basically, if you have a big dream, you have to give up some things that you've been holding on to, and then go after it. So that's the monologue for today. That's the challenge of the big dream is basically letting go of some things that you had been holding on to, so that you can actually commit fully to what it is you want to do next. All righty. So our guest today is a guy with a big dream, and I'm going to go ahead and welcome him and bring him onto the American Gumption stage. Hello, Jay Toops. Welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show. How are you doing? Whoops.
Good morning, Steve. I'm well, thank you.
All righty, good.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you fine and dandy now. It sounds like we got a good connection. Good. So you and I met when I was living in Montana, and I was chasing my dream, and we didn't know who each other were, but we ended up meeting. We had some, things. It was a small little community we were living in, and we ended up meeting, and you shared with me your dream right at the beginning. I remember that was the first thing you said. I said, hey, I got this idea. And so without going too much into the details of the idea, because we're going to unpack all that, just give like a very short version of who that is. And then I have to read your bio and I have to play the welcoming song. So you get like a minute to just sort of tell people who you are.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. My name is Jay Toops. I am the chairman, CEO, and founder of BioRoot Energy, Inc. We are a Delaware corporation based about 40 miles from the nearest traffic light in western Montana, in the Bitterroot National Forest. We are here to stay and make a big difference in how the world thinks about trash and garbage. Something we all generate, something we all toss. What can we do with all of these wastes? Also, what can we do with forestry materials instead of pile and burn them? And my journey from an entrepreneur began in the software development industry, where I worked for many years, and then moving from downtown Salt Lake City to I call it outer Montana, so that I could live a Green Acres kind of life. And by George, I have arrived. So,
all righty. Well, very good. Well, let me do this. I'm going to repeat a few of the things you said. I'm going to like to read your bio, and then we have a song that we play, and it's called the First Time Guest Welcoming Song. So you only get to hear this one. So we're thinking you're going to come back a second time, because the conversation we want to have is kind of two parts. One is just the big picture and the concept, and then the next segment we talked about would be more on the technology thing. So we're going to kind of avoid the nitty gritty details of all of this, but really lay out the picture today. Would that be, does that sound like a good plan? Great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Let me tell people who you are. Again, Jay Toops is the founder and CEO of BioRoot Energy, BioRoot Energy, Inc. You can see it right below. There's the website. Today, it is BioRoot Energy is one of today's best positioned clean fuel startups. Its purpose is to develop gas to liquid GTL fuel projects designed to convert solid and liquid waste, biomass, methane, and CO2 into clean, powerful, higher mixed alcohol fuels and specialty chemicals. So that's the technology part, and we'll get to that eventually. But we're going to talk about the idea of getting rid of the trash, and the fact that there's like a bit of an environmental issue going on in our world. So prior to founding BioRoot Energy, Jay worked for over 40 years as a serial entrepreneur, executive, consultant, or employee in the areas of real estate, oil field services, information technology, music, retail merchandising, publishing, and marketing communications. You've done a little bit of everything. You have a diverse background. That's wonderful. And Jay is an award-winning guitarist and lifelong supporter of the performing arts. So Jay Toops, welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show. And let me play the song, and then we'll turn the stage over to you, and we'll get into all the details. So here's the First Time Guest Welcoming Song.
Wonderful.
Hmm. Oh, all righty. Well, very good. Well, Jay, have you ever had a marching band welcome you to a broadcast before?
Never in my life, Steve. First time.
All righty. Well, good. Well, welcome the Washington Post March. Hey, I'm seeing a comment by Thomas Slab, and he says, or Slave, he says nothing is playing at 10:06, and yet I show that I'm live, and I'm not sure. It's on Facebook, that comment. So hopefully we are live. I mean, I don't have a way of testing that. If someone's out there and watching this, put a comment in and let us know. So we'll just go forward, Jay, because we're recording it at a minimum, but I think we're,
Yes.
Alrighty. So you moved to Montana what year?
In 1998.
1998, and you didn't have any idea about BioRoot Energy at that time.
No, I did not. I was happily, gainfully employed technologist working for a company called Novell, which is a very large networking software company based in Utah. And BioRoot Energy was not yet on my radar screen, but it didn't take long for that to enter my life here, and I can get to that, how I came to found the company and what led to founding the company when we're ready.
Yeah. So the place you end up living is not. I moved to a small town. I moved to Hamilton, Montana, which is 50 miles south of Missoula, which is, has an airport and has 100,000 people, and the immediate area of Hamilton is 10,000 people. Tell people where you were living.
Thank you. I live actually inside the Bitterroot National Forest. I bought a piece of private property within the forest boundary, and I actually pay the Forest Service an easement fee for the road that my home is on. I have 4 acres of trees that are surrounded by national forest. I could walk out my back door and walk 150 miles without crossing a road. Um, I drink water from a creek, chop my own wood, take care of my own land, and have been very happy here now for going on 23 years.
So you're out there, though, in the middle of, it's not actually in the middle of nowhere, but it's off the beaten path. We'll say that.
It's close.
You said it's about 40 miles from the nearest traffic light. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's actually slightly over 40 miles. The nearest town is Darby, Montana, population 650 or thereabouts. In my local area, I have neighbors, but my closest neighbor is several hundred yards away through the trees and through the woods. It is very mountainous, lots of rivers and creeks and tributaries and lots of critters. I'm fond of saying that I have more 4-legged neighbors than 2-legged neighbors, which is in fact true. Lots of elk and deer and moose and bear, coyotes, foxes, wolf, you name it.
So you're there only for a short time, maybe a year or 2 or 3, and there's an event. What was that event, and how did that kind of change your thoughts about all the wood that has been falling down and just laying on the ground in the forest?
Absolutely. In the summer of 2000, there was a very large wildfire in the Bitterroot National Forest that burned about 500,000 acres of forest. I was a witness to this blaze, which lasted several weeks. Uh, it led me into a questioning of the methodology we go by in suppressing fires in a place where fire has always been part of the landscape, and this is what in some ways has led to the larger fire phenomena we have in the western United States, is that we've put out fires now aggressively for well over a century, And that has allowed forests to essentially blossom with far more woody biomass, where historically 1 acre might have 20 trees prior to the settling of the West and the populating of the West. Historically, you might have had 20 trees. Now you probably have 200 to as many as 500 trees on the same acre. So if anyone wonders why are we getting larger fires that are harder to control, this is exactly why. There is far more fuel ready to burn from a century of fire suppression, so that when fires do happen, they tend to be large, stand replacing, soil sterilizing fires that are very, very difficult to fight. And this is what led me into a kind of a what's wrong with this picture of how are we fighting fires and how are we managing all of this abundance in the forest that is growing up. And we call them wildland urban interfaces. I don't live in the wilderness, but I live contiguous and hard by wilderness. And it's the wildland urban interfaces around communities which are most at risk from this overabundance of woody biomass, too many trees, not enough government effort, and not enough money from the government to go in and do what we call fuels reduction or thinning of forest materials. And this is different than logging in the traditional sense. It's forest restoration involves the removal of what are called ladder fuels, so that it typically fire would come through and remove these um, bushes, small diameter trees, and keep the forest floor clean while the larger trees matured. And that, in removing fire from the landscape, has allowed all of these ladder fuels to flourish. And I call some of the Bitterroot National Forest a dog hair forest. And if you can just imagine how thick a dog's hair is when you run your hand through the dog's back, in many places the forest is impenetrable. You cannot walk through this forest because it is so heavily overgrown. And that is the situation that led me into, well, what can we do with what needs to come out of the forest besides pile it and burn it using tax dollars? What can the private sector do to let's use a $5 word and say valorize these materials instead of treating them as waste and sending them to the sky? What can we do with these materials? We can't make paper out of pine cones, needles, barks, branches, cones, and small diameter trees. We can't make power out of them because biomass boilers are a little too finicky. They need pure wood chip. So, okay, we've got millions and millions of tons of trash, forest trash, that are typically piled and burned by private, state, and federal landowners or stakeholders, as it were. So our mission was to develop a clean, responsible, and scalable solution to utilize what is typically piled and burned. And I will move into how does this relate to plastic, trash, sewer sludge, old tires, you name it. How there is there a relationship? And absolutely there is. So I will
So
leave it
before
to
you
you to
get
ask
to
the
that,
next
though,
question.
you got involved in the Big Sky Coalition. Is that really and that was some type of a Montana based or some type, maybe it was a federal based, well, Big Sky, I'm thinking it was Montana based look at that.
It was.
Is that the part where you kind of finally piece together that, hey, we can actually do something with this instead of just burning it? We could actually convert this to something useful.
That is correct. Big Sky Coalition was essentially a citizen-led organization that was really on fire with air quality issues because we breathe wildfire smoke almost every summer here in the Bitterroot Valley. Either it's coming from fires in the local forest, or it's coming from western forest in Idaho, in Oregon, Washington, California. Not at
Right.
all unusual to have weeks to months of it almost looks like smog or fog around us, and air quality is dismal. Big Sky Coalition was essentially formed to lobby political organizations for greater attention to fuels reduction in the forest, and seeking to achieve by policy a greater responsiveness to these issues in the wildland urban interfaces. And it was in the research phase of vetting all of the approaches that have heretofore been used by government, by the private sector, and picking what we felt were the best of the best. We did a biomass symposium in 2008. I was a presenter in that symposium, and that was in Hamilton, Montana. And it's a very thinly populated part of the country, Western Montana, and we drew 600 people at the First Interstate Center in Hamilton, which is a big crowd for such a small town. And that was an indicator of a deep and abiding interest in quality of life issues. And it was that takeaway from that biomass symposium and the presentations that led me into pulling the trigger on, well, what can the private sector do that the government will never do?
So what was the light bulb moment when you realized that there was the potential of using the gas to liquid, converting carbon biomass into an alcohol fuel? How did that like moment arrive when you suddenly either stumbled upon the technology, or I mean, what happened and what led you to that?
Great question, because that really is key to understanding why this is a viable enterprise. There are two components to producing higher mixed alcohol fuel: the what we call the front end and the back end. The front end is what we call a gasifier, and the back end is what we call a gas to liquid synthesis reactor. And let me just take the gasifier. Everyone knows what a wood stove is. You put wood in, it's got a smokestack, you burn the wood, you get the heat, and the particles and the CO2 and the heat, the waste heat, go out of the stack. A gasifier is like a wood stove, except there is no stack. Everything that goes in is managed completely. There are no unplanned events of emitting process emissions. Very, very high temperature, and it breaks the materials apart. So if you have woody biomass, trash, garbage, what have you, these molecules come apart very gracefully under high heat, low oxygen, and form what we use to produce the fuel, which is called syngas, synthetic gas. And I won't go too far into that, but it's basically a form of methane that we then convert to higher mixed alcohol fuel. So we pass the syngas from the gasifier um, to the gas to liquid reactor, and from there, the GTL reactor spits out what we call C1 through C8 N linear biodegradable water soluble alcohols, from methanol to as high as decanol. And that is the higher mixed alcohol fuel formula. It is a super fuel. It's 138 octane. When people drive the fuel, they go, wow, this is an epiphany. It's far stronger than corn ethanol, which many people are familiar with because it's in most unleaded gasoline at about 10%. This fuel is a second generation or a next generation alcohol fuel that is not one alcohol like ethanol, but as many as 8. And so anyway, that is our kind of a review of the process architecture, but important to understand the zero emission aspects of this. We are not a smokestack business. We are not interested in making matters worse. We're interested in improving how the human race and how our country manages carbon in all of its forms. And that's solid, that's liquid, even gases like methane and carbon dioxide. All of these are resources in our business.
But there's, you have all this biomass on the floor of the carpet, or the carpet of the forest, the floor of the forest. And you're like, how do we get rid of this stuff? And so you realize that there's this process that's available. Now, you didn't invent this process in 2008. I mean, how did you become familiar with the fact that this process even existed? You just did a very nice job of giving a basic overview, but how did you stumble into it and realize that this was a potential solution?
Oh, certainly. That's actually fairly easy. The gasification is over a century old as a technology, as is gas to liquid fuel catalysis. And we need only look as far as pre-war Germany for good examples of gasifiers actually hanging off the back of jeeps and half tracks, troop movers. Gasifying wood to make these half tracks go because there was no petroleum, and the gas to liquid fuel synthesis method was invented in the 1920s by two German chemical engineers, doctors Fischer and Tropsch. And Fischer-Tropsch method has been very well established worldwide for over, just about 100 years. Fischer-Tropsch is a very large business. For example, there are a number of companies like Royal Dutch Shell, another company called Sasol, producing vast amounts of synthetic diesel by gasifying coal and by steam reforming methane. And I just threw a different value in there, calling out the steam reformer, which is a gas. You need a different front end to convert the gas to syngas to get to a fuel output. So our use of these technologies, these are very well established industrial scale technologies that have been widely deployed, servicing the chemical industry, the fuels industry, and now they are starting to be used in the waste industry. There are other companies who are using gasification and gas to liquid fuel catalysis to very good effect. One of our closest neighbors is a company called Enerchem. Enerchem is a Canadian company, and they're doing wonderful work. They have a project up and operating in Edmonton, Alberta, that is taking municipal waste and converting it to methanol and then ethanol. So they're very similar to our business. We're better, but they were there first, and we grant them that. So there are numerous companies worldwide pursuing this track of what do we do with trash and garbage and the production of what we'll call commodity alcohols.
So
what
stop
is
right there.
Go ahead.
Let me, this is good because we've established that, first of all, there's all this carbon waste that's available in the forest. Now let's connect the dots to the fact that in our cities, we end up producing all kinds of waste, and there's like recycling programs that are going on, but there's basically landfills are just getting filled up with it. And you connected the dots with the fact that what is it on the floor of the forest in terms of wood chip and pine needles and all of that debris that gets burned is essentially the same chemical composition as the trash when you kind of go back into the, the big picture of it, and you can take that gasification process and do the same thing with trash that you initially stumbled into as a means of attempting to fight fires in a different way. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that is
Yeah.
absolutely correct. To us,
So,
a carbon is a carbon is a carbon.
mhm.
The United States produces about 270 million tons of solid waste per year, and that's just residential waste. The actual volume is exponentially larger when you start to look at industrial waste, commercial waste, the waste that is piled and burned in forests. It might be on the order of 1 billion tons a year of externalized waste, discarded carbon waste, which are either landfilled or incinerated, in some cases burned. And the the advent of gasification is essentially a 21st century solution to a 21st century problem of too much carbon that is entering air, water, and land from too many different vectors. This is why we have the Pacific garbage gyre, the spinning large areas of microplastics and plastics which are breaking down in the water column, settling to the ocean floor, and actually coming up through the food chain, being ingested by phytoplankton, which get eaten by larger animals. And we're eating, uh, currently, we're all ingesting on the order of about a credit card's worth of plastic. I think it's every week, if I'm not
Mm.
mistaken. We're playing with fire in the sense that all of this externalized carbon continues when continues to build around all human activity in the air, in the water, and in land. And we're internalizing it through the food chain by taking a breath, microplastics from carpet, what have you. So that is, there is a deep environmental aspect to this that there really are no other methods to disrupt our externalization of trash and garbage. And let me just say, we all live next to trash cans. Almost everyone listening, almost everyone is within 10 or 15 feet of a trash can every day of their life, all day long. Honestly, if these trash cans were snakes, we'd all be dead.
Mhm.
And this is important to understand is that we think, oh, we can send that trash to the landfill and it goes away. Well, we need to understand that there really is no such place as a way. There needs to be a better way.
Jay, what I'd like to do is share my screen or share some images from the website, from your website, and I'm just going to roll through them because it kind of summarizes the story we told. So let me just go through a couple of them and make a comment or two, and then you can add your comments afterwards. But basically, this is the idea that there's fuel opportunities from the trash and from these massive forest fires that are occurring in the world. That's what this picture shows. And there's all these cars out there on the road. Now, the next image is just that, the horrendous forest fires that happen across the West each and every year. Well, California has burned. We keep thinking California can't burn anymore because it's all burned up, but I don't know what the situation is. But the last couple of years have been horrendous for forest fires out there. And here's where, this is just a typical city street. Look at all that trash there, which you are basically saying is land or is is carbon at its very core and could be used and repurposed into an alcohol fuel. And where do all those bags go? They end up at the landfill. And you can see that, you have a nice graph. I don't have this picture of here, but you have a nice graph on your website that shows all of the landfills across the United States, some of which are closed because they just can't take any more room, and others which are, basically getting filled up and eventually are going to all be filled up. Here's just another pick: tires and tires, mountains of tires. All of that could be repurposed, is what you're saying. And then here, I guess this is just a picture of like some kind of a process plant where they're burning off methane or something from the plant, where it's essentially gas that needs to just be gotten rid of. And so it's just being burned off into the atmosphere. A lot of times you ride by a chemical plant and you see that sort of thing.
Yes, this is flared methane from North Dakota, proximal to a drilling pad for oil. They flare the methane where there are no pipelines to send it for cleaning. They just flare it on site. This is a very common practice around the world, and the less developed the oil field, the more likely that flaring occurs. And as you can see from the black smoke on that picture, flared methane is not just pure natural gas like when you light your stove and it burns very clean. Flared methane is full of something called natural gas liquids, which are other ethane, a number of different liquids, which are all very toxic, and that's where the black smoke comes from. All of that is typically removed. Go ahead.
So one of the things that, so if we looked at that whole big list of things, from the forest fires, all of to the trash, to the waste dump, to the, effluents that are burned off in some of these chemical processes, all of those things have the potential to take the technology that you're talking about and being recovered and converted to liquid alcohol, either fuel or specialty chemicals. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Every city has one or more landfills. Every city could support a higher mixed alcohol project that will not only add value to job creation. The fuel itself is water soluble. It is completely biodegradable. I wouldn't hesitate to burn it in my house because it is alcohol. You can put out an alcohol fire with water. You can't put out an oil fire with water. You spread the oil around, which continues to burn. And you could pour it on a house plant and feed that house plant lunch. It's because alcohols are nature's first chemistry set in decomposition. This is how nature decomposes materials. If you throw fruit in a bucket, you too can make alcohols. This is the oldest chemistry set on planet Earth, and this is how nature recycles carbons. We're applying the same methodology to all types of carbons, not just fruit in a bucket, but trash, woody biomass, even sewer sludge. Pardon me, a turd in a toilet is just as valuable to us as a plastic bottle, a Kleenex, a pine cone, what have you, because there's a carbon continuity here. It doesn't matter what it was, it matters what it is and what we can do with it. And will we ever run out of trash and garbage? No. The average American produces about 7 pounds of solid waste a day. That's never going to change. So we can bet the farm being able to monetize what we've thrown away for thousands of years. This is all humans know about how to get rid of trash. Is it goes away, which usually means over the next hill to a landfill. When I throw something away here in the forest, it must be trucked 100 miles to the Missoula landfill. Oh, and so the logistics of trash are enormous. There's enormous heartbreak because the communities around landfills tend to be disadvantaged economically. They tend to be polluted, and when you made mention of the recycling industry, let me just say gently that the recycling industry, as we have long understood it, is pretty much dead. That when China stopped importing recyclable scrap in 2018, it served notice to the world that we can't send materials back to China on empty freighters because they come over with Walmart goods and they need something to take back to China. They were taking recyclable scrap for the past 30 years. That ended completely in 2018 with Operation National Sword. You're welcome to Google it, read about it. So the concept of traditional recycling is now an artifact of history. It's no longer a viable practice. So there is a real need for modern recycling, and what we're doing is thermochemical carbon recycling. It's not just picking out the most valuable plastics and then landfilling or burning the rest. It's the totality of the pile and not just picking through it.
So we've established that there's clearly too much waste, and there's a potential fuels for, or there's potential raw material. There's an overabundance of raw material that's available for producing this alcohol this alcohol fuel or specialty chemicals. So we have a problem. We have too much trash. That trash is essentially fuel or the raw material, the starting place to make this alcohol fuel. And the alcohol fuel is actually a stronger and cleaner fuel, and it's more environmentally friendly fuel than what we've been using with the petrochemicals. So this is like a win-win-win. This is all common sense. Everybody who listened to this is going to go, okay, great. Like, what's the problem? And so why are we not doing this thing? And so we only have a few more minutes left today. And what I really wanted to do was establish the fact that there's a problem with too much waste. There's a potential to do something about it. There's obviously going to be technical challenges. You've assembled a team of people who believe they can overcome some of those challenges. We'll get into the technical part the next time we talk, and we'll talk about the processing. But give in the last couple of minutes that we have left, give an overview of what some of the challenges are and why this is, why isn't this being done? And, if we go back to my monologue today, is this too good to be true?
Well, no, it's not too good to be true. It is what's next if we know what's good for us. And I think most people are well aware of the train wreck in the energy industry, the oil and gas industry, climate change, global warming, trash pollution. This paradigm is essentially throttling the life out of not only humanity, but the natural order as well. We must evolve beyond the extract dump paradigm of dirty energy and waste externalization. And bringing these projects forward to deploy them next to, let's take a model city like San Francisco with maybe as many as 4 million people. These will be very large projects to accommodate the scale and the volume of wastes in on a daily basis. And we're not even talking about what's already in those landfills around San Francisco. We're talking about just interrupting the flow of waste materials from distributed from homes, picked up and transported to a landfill or an incinerator. This paradigm is the one that needs shifting for two reasons. Environment, this fuel burns 95% cleaner than gasoline. And that is on the low end of combustion emissions. With some additional work, we see being able to make the claim and defend the claim that it is a carbon negative fuel, because honestly, if you send all of these waste to landfills, Landfills contribute about 15% of all of the methane emissions in this world. Most people don't know that. So
Hmm.
if you add that 15% of methane emissions to to the stack of life cycle analysis of carbon emissions on what we call a well to wheels basis, deeply carbon negative. And let me just say that there is a great desire to move to zero emission energy, solar, wind, and electric vehicles, which I am absolutely a fan of. However, about 83% of the world's transportation and other energy needs are currently met by oil, gas, and coal. It is going to be many, many decades until there's enough penetration of electric vehicles to really make a dent in lowering air, water, and land pollution, and that includes emissions. But we can't just stop at emissions. We've got to say, okay, what about all those precipitators of emissions like landfills? Because those landfills are forever. They will off gas as long as there is material being sent to them and they're decomposing and off gassing. We can't flare it. We can make a little electricity, but we haven't really stemmed the problem. Our mission, in a great big hairy nutshell, and one of the difficulties, is ending the practice of landfilling or incinerating trash, not just reducing it, ending it, because it is the most feasible and most profitable way for humans to innovate forward in a carbon aware world. Prior to the advent of the 21st century, nobody really thought about the existential problems of pollution. And I think in the last 20 years, we've all kind of been served notice that there are a lot of problems that are festering. We must deal. And that is our value proposition to the world. Paradigms can shift. Just ask the horse and buggy people about automobiles. They can shift.
So it's interesting because we have this technology that's 100 years old. What did you call it? Fisher tropes.
That is correct.
So Fisher tropes technology, where you convert something from a solid form into a gas form into a liquid form, is established technology. Uh, there are companies that are doing different elements of this in one form or another currently, not very many of them, but there
Yes.
are people out there doing it. There's obviously no shortage of fuel for the process because there's lots and lots of waste that are out there, and that waste is not getting any smaller, and it's getting bigger, and it's a real problem and a concern that that we maybe don't have, but we certainly should have, and I think people are awakening to that. So I guess the
Yes.
real problem or the real challenge is that people are just not used to thinking about this way. It is going to take some capital, to get this thing up and running. You kind of would think if you got it started and it worked, everybody would want to be jumping on the bandwagon to follow suit with this whole thing. So, I'll give you the last word and we'll wrap up here, and we'll invite you back and we'll talk specifically about the technology, because I'm sure there's some challenges, and I'm sure there's some challenges with scaling up. But what would you like to how would you like to leave this conversation today? Because really all we wanted to do is say, hey, there's a real opportunity to make a difference in the world.
Right. Well, you hit on all of the touch points here. It's important that people will never support something that they make make a hasty decision. Oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Read our information, contact us. We have our business plan is a book. It is a very deep dive. We can overwhelm a layperson with too much technical information. So everybody has a comfort level about what information do they need to feel good about our business and our technologies and so forth. And I really suggest that people visit biorootenergy.com and hit the endorsements page and read what hundreds of people have learned about our business and the technologies from doing their own due diligence. And these are doctors, lawyers, engineers, foresters, politicians. The citizen endorsement is the biggest win that we can have, because the more the general public thinks like a corn farmer, and I'll circle back and finish up with that, the more that people can think like farmers, with one notable exception. Instead of going out and growing corn, our crop is our crap. Oh, it's the only crop we'll ever need, because this is something we all do every day of our lives. We make crap. It's time to do more with it.
Well, very good. Jay,
So,
thank you so much for joining us this morning. We will invite you back, and we'll talk about the technology. So if you're watching this in the replay, and we'll link to the other, the future version of it. You can watch both episodes. If the technology is too much for you, then just make sure you understand the big picture, which was what we tried to do here. And that's just lay out the fact that the technology exists. It obviously will need to be, perfected, and scaled up, but it's ready to go. It's 100-year-old technology, and there's no shortage of fuel or crap for the front end that we load in to the to the process. So anyway, thank you so much, Jay, for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll welcome you back. We'll get you scheduled real soon. And we'll really just make the next one about more of the technology piece. This was easier for me because I was able to understand the big picture. I'll have to bone up on my technology part, and you'll guide me through it. So how's that sound?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I've appreciated the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Jay. We'll see you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Jay Tubes coming to us from the Western Montana, from the BioRoot Energy headquarters in the Bitterroot Forest. And anyway, he's got a great vision, and I love it. And we met several years ago, and he was really developing the idea. He's brought it along that much closer. It just feels like the time is right to jump in and embrace that technology. Alrighty, so that's it. We're going to wrap up today's show. I did get Bettina checking in from Seattle. Thank you, Bettina. And I that confirmed that at least we had people out there hearing this. I'm not sure why Thomas wasn't able to get the channel that we were broadcasting on to him. But anyway, hopefully he'll be able to see the replay if he missed the live performance. Alrighty, so Tomorrow is Saturday. We're not going to be here, and we won't be here on Sunday either. We will be here on Monday. Tuesday, Amy Gray Cunningham, the author of Daring to Believe. It's a memoir about her donating a kidney. On Wednesday, Nicole Nassif, she has a brand new Imy's Kitchen restaurant concept. Nicole and I worked together starting in 1998 with Bubba Gump. And so she has a Lebanese fast food restaurant concept that it sounds fascinating. So she'll describe that on Wednesday. Thursday, Stacy Lamar King returns, and he's going to talk about the whole project management professional, PMP, what that is, and why people should be aware of what a professional project manager does. Jay's going to need several professional project managers to get his business off the ground. All righty, very good. That's it. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining us.